was born in Sri Lanka, where I've spent most of my life, this beautiful island off the coast of India, the teardrop island you hear about in the Indian Ocean. And ancient travelers, when they came here, they thought they'd come to paradise. I mean, this country that I've lived in has the most beautiful oceans, waterfalls, and natural resources. Everything grows here. We have gems coming out of the ground. It's just a beautiful place. But also in this country, we have a lot of injustices. For one thing, the three main industries, the three main income earners in this country fall on the shoulders of poor marginalized women. We're talking about the garment industry, we're talking about the tea industry, and the housemaid industry. On top of it, in Sri Lanka, we've had all forms of human trafficking. Child labor, labor trafficking, sex trafficking. Until 10 years ago, when we finished a 25-year-old ethnic war, we had child conscription or child soldiers. And the housemaid industry is known for the unsafe migration of women who are poor, who go to the Middle East to be housemaids, to take care of other people's children while they leave theirs behind. So today I want to talk to you a bit about that. In 2015, I was awarded a Fulbright scholarship, and I was very excited about it because I got to actually do formal research. All this time, everything I knew was informal, just anecdotal, talking to women who have been so badly treated in the Middle East. So this time I actually decided to talk to 200 women. 100 women who had already gone and spent years in the Middle East, and 100 women that were getting ready to go. So you ask yourself, why do these women go to the Middle East? Why do they go to be housemaid? Usually it's because of a poverty issue, because of issues at home, or the fact that they are in debt to their neck through loan sharks who are using them for exorbitant interest rates, and then they borrow again to pay the interest rate, so they have debt upon debt, and finally they come to a point that there's no way to deal with this, that they say, okay, I'm going to go get a job in the Middle East. And for some reason, there are these agents walking around at the same time who say, hey, if you sign up to go to the Middle East, we will give you some money up front. Then you can pay your debt and you go to the Middle East for 2 years, work and come back. Well, it's not as simple as that, because when you leave your family, you are leaving your children, you're leaving your husband. And usually these are all vulnerable people because they've been living with debt and lack of income. And all of us need a mother. When mom leaves to go to the Middle East for 2 years, you can be sure everything's going to be falling apart. In fact, research and other studies show that the most amount of child abuse in Sri Lanka happen where the children are children of migrant mothers. So besides abuse, there are other issues. Like the mother, when I spoke to these women and said, why are you going to the Middle East? And they would say, oh, I want to have a better life for my children. For example, I want to have a home. I want to give them a good education so they can get a job, so they don't have to live in poverty like us. Okay, so education is important, but who's going to take care of the education of your children when you go? Well, I haven't thought about it. So really what happens is they really haven't thought about the situation when they leave, who's going to be there, step in for them and take care of all the needs of their family. How about the money you earn? How are you going to send it, or are you going to keep it? Usually what happens is the mothers go there and they send the money back home, and guess what? Dad there most often spends the money, and not for the reason that she went. We always have the issue of, other things like maybe child sex trafficking, incest, teenage marriages, dropping out of school, you name it. When mother is gone, these are some of the things that the families face. So talking to these women, it was interesting because the women who had gone and come back, in every focus group, everybody cried because their stories were horrific. Stories like they never got paid, they were physically abused, they were, just the way they were treated by the women in the Middle East was really quite surprising. So let me tell you a little bit about women in Sri Lanka. Even though women always have to respect their men in their life, and women are treated differently, they're not treated without respect in most situations. For example, Sri Lanka had the first woman prime minister, or there are lots of heads of companies that are women. In fact, we had the second woman prime minister, while big countries are still trying to have their first. So we as a country, say politically, have developed. However, in the home, the culture is a woman is always going to be subservient to a man. However, when the women go to the Middle East, which is, all those Arab countries, they're all Muslim countries, and women most often are definitely play a subservient role. In fact, there are many times there's more than one wife. There's many times women just have to not give their opinion. And they have to be, most often in countries like Saudi Arabia, the women have to be all covered except for their eyes. In Sri Lanka, we don't have those issues, right? So when a housemaid goes from Sri Lanka to the Middle East, one of the things, if she goes to Saudi Arabia, she also has to wear the hijab. She has to be totally covered, and except in the house. And there are other issues, like she is subservient to her mistress, and her mistress can treat her any way she wants. So there's really an interesting trickle down here of the husband treating the wife not so nice, and the wife not treating the maid so nice. I mean, some of the things the women, the Sri Lankan housemaids went through was horrible. Like, they would not be given food to eat, they weren't paid their salaries, and they had to sometimes do sexual favors to the husband because he commanded it, and the wife was arranging for it, or the mother-in-law would be. I mean, and nobody spoke about it. Of course, there's sharia law, and like one of the mothers told me, sharia law is really for us foreigners. In fact, everybody knows the story of Rizana. This became a worldwide known story. She had a forged passport, so though she was only 16 or 17, it said she was older. She gets there to do a cleaning job, but she didn't know her job was to look after an infant, and she's never done that. So she was given an infant, and while she was feeding the milk, a few months later this happened, the baby got choked and the baby died. And immediately she was put on death row for murder, for manslaughter. And even though the president of the country and the Queen of England, everybody tried to stop this, because first she was a minor, two, it was a genuine accident. And, I remember the day she got beheaded. It was the whole country of Sri Lanka was listening and watching and hoping they wouldn't chop her head off, but they did. And then, of course, the country sent some people to say, we like to help the family. But the family said they didn't want any help. It was so much. I think most of the people in Sri Lanka were hoping that they would not do that. So Sharia law is they'll chop your hand off if you steal and chop your head off if you kill. So there's no way to get out of it, especially if you're a foreigner. But an interesting situation happened. In fact, this other mother who went to the Middle East, she was telling me her stories. I had known this mother since she was a little kid, and she was in our project, and she was just a little girl of 13 when her mother married her off, which shocked her. She was her only child. And then she had all these children by the time she was 19, 20, and she had decided to go to the Middle East to find a job to help support her family. And she was telling me some of the stories. Like, one was, she said that, she learned Arabic very quickly. And in the neighbor's house, there were like these condominium houses where there were 4 flights and blocks of 4 flights. And the top flight was a rooftop where people hung their clothes. And she got friendly with the neighbor girl from Indonesia, and they would exchange a few Arab words, but they'd meet once a day when they went to hang clothes. And one day she was on the top floor and she looked, and what had happened was that this little Indonesian housemaid was made to stand on a little pail, on a like an inverted box, and the guy, her boss, threw her over the balcony. She fell down, she died, and a few minutes later she saw that a man came in, put her in a body bag, and dragged the bag and put it in the big garbage. They had this big container garbages. And she was so freaked out about it, she ran and told her boss, this is what I saw, this is horrible. And he said, if you speak to anybody about it, I'll be throwing you off the balcony too. So she didn't. In fact, she told me, this is the first time I'm talking about it, because you're asking me, did anything bad happen while you were there? And she said, nobody usually asks us anyway. They only want to make sure we brought money back. Nobody ever asks us, how was our time there? What were the tough times? And she's, with tears in her eyes, she said, thank you for asking us. In fact, she went on to tell me another story, which was, she had got an asthmatic attack and had to be taken to hospital, and she was hospitalized for a few days. The lady next to her was a girl from Sri Lanka, and she was sleeping on her stomach, and she was in pain. So she asked her, what happened to you? Why are you so, miserable? Why are you hurting? Tell me about it. Talk to me. And she said, my boss's son raped me. And she said, I got raped front and back, and I've had 23 stitches. And my boss came to me and said, I'm not supposed to say what happened. I have to say that I fell on this metal pole and that it went through me. That's what happened. And don't say anything else, and I'll give you a nice big package of money and send you home. And she said, I was really sad. I was a virgin. And I was collecting money for a dowry. That's why I came to the Middle East to work. And now I'm going back, never wanting to see another man. I am so upset. And so those are kind of some of the stories you hear, So about 40 years ago, my husband Tom and I started helping one family in Sri Lanka that was desperately poor, living in a slum. And when we used to help the one family, there were so many other kids with their big eyes watching us. They all were hungry or they were sick. So many different issues going on in this slum. And before we knew what, we just got organized and we started a project. We called it Community Concern. And a few of our friends joined us, but mostly Tom and I were out there working with the poor. We had a feeding program, a health clinic. We had ways to clean people's wounds and give them worm medicine and de-lice their hair. And it was really so fulfilling for us, to see somebody with a big wound one day and a week later the wound is healed. And for Tom and me, this was a way we loved to spend our time. And our kids came along with us. And very soon the program got bigger and bigger. And 40 years later, we're spending our time still helping the people. But we are working with more like 3,000 kids and 1,000 adults doing 15 different programs. Now, one of the things we do is we are empowering women. We want women not to go to the Middle East. We want them to stay home, take care of their kids, and find a skill or job that can earn them much better than what they would earn in the Middle East. So we started skills training, vocational training, women in construction, even women sewing from home, looking after their children, being able to help the children be educated and really fulfill the dreams that most mothers, even if they're poor, have. So human trafficking is where people are enslaved. They're forced to do things they don't want to do, and forced very often to do things for no pay, and very often abused and have no rights whatsoever. So for example, let's take something like sex trafficking. What is that? Sex trafficking is when people are prostituted and belong to someone else, and their body is sold over and over and over again to do sexual acts with people, and they sometimes are even drugged, and they have no choice. And the same for labor trafficking, where they take little children and make them workers, maids and cooks and cleaners, and they're still little children, and they should be having the basic human rights of going to school and having a safe place to be and not get abused. And there's sexual abuse involved. And when it comes to the migrant women issue, the reason this becomes human trafficking is that these women, they go hoping to have a good job, to make some money and come back home. But unlike the tea and the garment industry that we spoke about, those are formal sectors. They have laws, labor laws that protect these women. But when it comes to the migrants who go to the Middle East for housemaids, it's called the informal sector. And there's no protection, no laws. They just fall under immigration laws. So anything can happen to them, and there's no justice for them. So very often when they work in these houses, they come there, the first thing that's done is their passports taken away, their cell phones taken away, and they're working 20 hours a day, and they have nowhere to complain. And if they do complain, that's bad news, because they will get punished. They have absolutely no freedom, no rights. They are treated as proper slaves. That's it. I'll never forget when I met Swarna. She shared with me her tale of woe. Once again, I don't think she's told anybody about this story because it was a horrible story. She was working in a home, a Middle Eastern home. She went there to be a housemaid for 2 years, and her mistress was a school teacher, and her master was a big shot in the police. And it was okay at the beginning. And then one day the mistress came to her and said, my husband wants to have sex with you. And she said, no, you can't do that because I'm a married woman. I have a husband at home and I need to be faithful to my husband. I'm very sorry, I can't do that. And she said, you work for me, you have no choice. So I was dragged in, and he had me, raped me whenever he wished. He wanted to have me. Now, in the meantime, his mother, her mother-in-law, was very angry about this, and one day pulled Swarna into the bathroom and decided to chop her long head of hair. Now, this is something I heard in so many stories. When the wife got mad or the husband got mad, they just chopped a long head of hair. You know, us Sri Lankan women love to have long hair and they look after it. And a lot of the Middle Eastern women don't have long hair. So maybe this was a threat to something. I don't ever understand why so many women get their hair chopped off there. So here she's in the bathroom with the mother-in-law. She takes off her clothes, strips her, cuts her hair, and then there was a knock on the bathroom door. And there was an urgent phone call for the mother-in-law. So she left Swarna in the bathroom in this state, crying, when this community house, there was a girl, she was the niece of the owner, and she came up to her and said, I know what your problem, here's some clothes, put it on, I'm going to open the back door, run, go as fast as you can. So she was afraid to go to the police station because maybe she'll meet her boss. But somehow or other she was able to get there, and they found some help, got her to the embassy, and she was able to come home. But this kind of trauma with no consequences was just horrible. This is like slavery plus abuse. So one of the things I found out meeting these women who are getting ready to go in this training camp was they were not prepared. They had not put the pieces in place for their time overseas to be successful, to fulfill their dreams. Instead, there were so many gaps. You could be sure that by the time they came back home, the children would be in a real mess and there would be no money. So this for me was very sad. I collected all this information and the other stories of the people who went and came, and then the in-depth story the next year. And I had so much material, and I put it together in a book. The book is called The Breadwinner. and it's stories of slavery of women who go to the Middle East to be housemaids. These women are the largest income earner for the country. They bring in $7 billion a year, and that is one of the reasons that the country continues to send their women. We sell our women to the Middle East to be housemaids, where they bring up other people's children while our own children are hurting. One of the key pieces here in the story is that Sri Lankan government depends on the money brought in by these women to run the country. But on the other hand, the government doesn't protect these women. The very people who are giving their lives up to bring this money in and take care of their families need protection. Now, I know when it came to the Philippines, the government there actually discussed matters with the Middle Eastern countries and got 1 day off for the women a week. Sri Lankan women get 0 days off, and they work 20 hours a day. Most of them, and a few of them, work 19. So we're saying these women, this is slavery, this is slave labor. And anytime these people who work there even speak, nobody hears them, nobody wants to hear them. And if they complain, they are punished for complaining. So there's no place for their voice to be heard. So when I collected these stories, I'm just hoping that we will pay attention to the pain and suffering of these women and give them some choices. Train them, get them to negotiate better terms, give them advice on how to make their time there successful, but mostly see if they don't need to go. Is there a way they can stay back here and earn? Is there a way they can stay back here and pay off their loan sharks? These poor marginalized women in Sri Lanka, we are talking about over 1 million women. I mean, there are 2 million migrant workers. 1/10 of the population of Sri Lanka is in the Middle East, and we're talking about mostly women. In a country like Saudi Arabia, there's over 600,000 of us Sri Lankan women being housemaids, and that's a place where Sharia law is the worst in terms of it is eye for an eye and a hand for theft and a neck for what they think is murder. And very often they take Sharia law into their hands and they perform it themselves. They will hurt the person who made some mistake. That's why I had one of the mothers tell me when she opened the big garbage dump, she saw a dead person's eyes staring right at her. And nobody knew who it was. And these stories go on. There is no justice for these poor women who come from all over the world. After all, the statistics are 3% of the world's population are migrant workers. So we have them in Sri Lanka, and our government depends on it, and it's time our government does something to protect these women. In life, what I've always thought is we are responsible for what we see, what we hear, and something we can make a change. And I think, I remember what Margaret Mead said, when a small group of committed people come together, they can change the world. And indeed, this is the only way it's been done. So today, I just want to inspire people to be part of the change that they want to see, not to just be hearers, but to say, I'm going to do something, not to just forget about the hurting slavery that's going on in the world. Modern day slavery is a real issue, and if we want to see an end to it, we all need to be committed to make a change, to learn about it, to have awareness, do what we can in the area of prevention, to protect the victims, and ask for prosecution. We have to ask for justice. Justice is needed. Without justice, people do whatever they want. So consequences are needed for people who hurt people. I hope you take time to read my book, The Breadwinner. It's available online as an ebook or a printed book on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, on Book Locker, and maybe even other places. I'm not sure, but it is available. It's got good reviews, and it's worth your time. I mean, it's really important that we as a society that cares actually gets knowledge and collects information and make a plan on how we can make a difference.